In this video, I show you how the Gelila sweater dress is sewn. Have fun! Hello and welcome to a new video from me. My name is Eliza, and in this video, I will show you step by step how you can easily sew a cozy sweater dress yourself. There is a pattern for the Gelila sweater dress in sizes XS to XL. In the info box you will find a direct link to the pattern, and I will also show you here how you can find my Etsy shop. I've dreamed of a sweater dress like this for a long time. My idea was a dress that is as comfortable as a cozy sweater and still looks as chic as a real dress. And I think it really worked. The dress sits loosely, so you don't need a model figure for it. But it's still not cut oversized. It has a V-neck that is not too wide and therefore does not expose too much skin in winter. And it has pockets. Personally, I always think that when there is a time of the year when you can wear short dresses and skirts particularly well, it is the cold season. You can combine thick tights or even leggings with clothes like this. In addition, the Gelila sweater dress goes well with chic boots, casual boots, or simply sneakers, depending on which style you like best. How would you style this dress in winter? I'm really curious about that. So feel free to write me a comment. Or even better, you sew yourself a Gelila and send me a photo of it. Now I wish you a lot of fun watching and then hopefully also sewing. Here you can see the cut pieces. You need the back part cut once on the fold and the front part also once on the fold. The sleeve twice. The pocket parts 4 times. The cuff twice. The front facing once and the back once as well. Transfer the 4 notches from the arm ball. And the notches that show you the position of the pocket. Those are the bottom 2 on the main parts. Put the 2 main parts right sides together and pin the shoulders. Place the facing parts on top of each other, right sides together, and pin the 2 short sides. Sew the shoulder seam 1 centimeter to the edge. Sew the facing a centimeter to the edge. So that the area at the neckline does not become too thick later, iron the seam allowance from the facing flat. Now it goes to the overlock. If you don't have an overlock, you can neaten everything I do with the overlock in the video with a zigzag stitch on the sewing machine. Neaten the shoulder seams. Now neaten the facing. It is sewn on the right, beautiful side of the fabric. Start at the front middle, now neaten the entire outer edge all around. When making the transition, make sure that the seam allowance is unfolded and that you sew it that way. Leave the thread a little longer, take a needle and pull out the 2 straight threads. Now you can knot the threads and cut them relatively short. Pull the shoulder seams from the main part to the back and iron them like this. Now place the facing right sides together on the cutout. What I always like to do with V-necks is to mark the middle. To do this, I simply draw a straight line from the middle to the tip on the left side of the facing. This line then shows where you have to turn the fabric later. Pin the facing all around. Sew the facing a centimeter to the edge. For all crossing seams, make sure that you sew them as you have pre-ironed them. When you get to the front middle, you just keep sewing right up to the line straight ahead. When you are on the line, you can turn the fabric to continue the seam on the other side of the point. So that the V-neck looks good, we have to cut the seam allowance in the tip once. As deep as possible, but without cutting into the seam. Cut the seam allowance at the front down to about half. Fold the facing inward and iron it carefully to create a clean cutout. Stick some pins in from the outside. To have an orientation point for the tip again, fold the front side in the middle and stick a pin across it. Sew this seam from the outside, starting with a shoulder seam. I sew here with 2 centimeters to the edge, but you could also choose, for example, 3 centimeters, that would also look very nice, and sew a little more of the facing on the inside. I set the stitch length a little higher to 3.5 because I like it optically. At the tip you proceed exactly as you did before. Sew to the transverse pin, then turn the fabric at that point to continue sewing. And the V-neck with facing is finished. Next, let's take care of the pockets. Place the front piece with the right side of the fabric up. Take two of the pocket's parts and place them right sides together between the two notches as shown here. Put in some pins. You then do the same with the back. Now neaten all four edges where the pockets and main part meet. Neaten this piece right on the edge. Iron this seam flat from the outside and place the overlock seam in the direction of the dress. In theory, it works the other way too. I've tried both and I like this variant a little better. The seam now only shows under the pocket towards the main part and where it looks out again in the other direction. Repeat these steps for all four pockets parts. Lay the main parts right sides together. Lay the parts so that the pockets are exactly on top of each other and pin the side in place. Sew up the side as I show you with my finger. This seam is also sewn again with 1 centimeter to the edge. When you get to the pocket, make sure to sew the overlock seam as you ironed it before. You then neaten the same route with an overlock. And this is how it all looks like. With pockets at hip height, it is particularly important that they lie well so that they are not too bulky. Therefore, we now iron the side seam to match the pocket. And atypical, to the front, means in the direction in which the pocket will then point. In doing so, you can lay the slit of the pocket on top of each other in a neat manner and iron it so tightly. In addition, we now sew a lock stitch at the top and bottom of the openings. To do this, sew a small lock stitch seam of about 4 stitches on the side of the pocket by sewing back and forth. This makes the pocket easier to lay flat, and if the area is used often, the side seam will not open at this point. The hidden side pockets are finished. Now let's work on the sleeves. Lay the sides of the sleeve right sides together and pin them in place. Sew the side with 1 centimeter to the edge and then neaten the edge with the overlock. Lay the short side of the cuff right sides together and sew this section only the width of a presser foot with a normal sewing machine. Note, the cuffs are actually made for very stretchy material such as cuff fabric. If your fabric is not very stretchy, you can cut the cuffs up to 2 centimeters wider. This is what these parts look like afterwards. I also ironed the seam on the sleeves in the right direction, backwards. The back is the side with the 2 notches. We want the seams on the cuffs to be as flat as possible again. So unfold the seam allowance and iron it flat. Fold the cuff left sides together, make sure that the seam lies flat on top of each other and iron it into shape. Then it looks like this. To bring the cuffs and sleeves together evenly, fold the cuff at the seam and insert a pin on the opposite side. You do the same with the sleeve ends. When the left side of your sleeve is outside, you can slide the cuff into the sleeve. Seam on seam and needle on needle. The cuffs are a little narrower than the sleeve ends and have to be stretched a little when sewing on. So that this point remains elastic, we only sew this seam with the overlock. The easiest way is to sew this seam from the inside. Make sure you always sew all 3 layers and sew everything at the point with the seams as you had ironed it before. You can pull the end of the thread into the seam with a darning needle. Next, the sleeve and main part come together. Lay out your pieces like this. The main part is inside out, the sleeves right sides out. The front part is on top and the side of the sleeves shows up with just 1 notch. Slide the sleeve through the armhole into the dress. Place the middle notch from the sleeve on the shoulder seam. Place the side seams exactly on top of one another, making sure that the seam allowances here point in different directions. Lay the notches and the rest of the route on top of each other and pin everything in place. I stick the pins directly from the inside, because that's where I'll sew. So this section from the inside is 1 centimeter to the edge. Then you neaten this edge with the overlock and finish the overlock seam, just like you did with the cuff by pulling the thread into the seam. The last thing we do is take care of the hem. Fold the lower edge inward 2 centimeters and iron this edge in place. Pin the root directly from the outside with pins. You can simply hide the protruding overlock seams from the side in the ironed over hem. I now sew the hem with the twin needle. It always works best for me when I set the stitch length very high. But that certainly differs from sewing machine to sewing machine. I start on one side seam, sew around a little less than 2 centimeters from the edge and finish the seam normally with a lock stitch. If you don't want to work with the twin needle, another stretchable stitch will do the same. And then the Gelila sweater dress is finished. I hope you like the pattern and the video, and you are happy with your dress. As always, I am very happy if you show me pictures of your work on Instagram. I'm also looking forward to seeing you again in my next video. Until then, I wish you all the best.